All right, welcome to my 9.2 part practice lab report. Now, while this is a bit of a comprehensive lab report, I thought I'd give a little bit of a brief background surrounding this topic and really highlight the fact that there's a growing body of interest in the field and a large emphasis being placed on the effectiveness of practice programs. The idea of practice is obviously to help athletes or participants become more proficient at the task that they are trying to perform, whatever that may be. And there's a lot of different methodologies that practitioners use. Two of the most common, however, though, are the part practice and whole practice methods. And with part practice, the idea is to take the whole skill and break it into parts and into components that can be focused on individually. And so, we might focus on a single aspect at a time and add more over time until we are able to successfully complete the various components, master them, and then put the whole thing together, put all the pieces together to perform the whole task. And so that's kind of the part practice method. That's one of the methods that we looked at here in this study for the task of juggling. We've also have the whole practice method, in which the participants are going to juggle right out the gate. They're just going to attempt to do so. And the idea is that we really want to see at the end of all this, we're going to measure during the retention tests how many passes each can complete when performing the whole juggling task. And so that's the ultimate goal, the purpose of this lab. So we also have to define which task that we're going to be implementing these methods for, because part practice is more conducive to certain tasks than others, and similarly whole practice is considered more conducive to certain tasks than others as well. And so for the task of juggling, we're generally going to consider this to be a discrete task. And this is really due to the fact that there's a lot of quick actions that are made. In each of these actions, ultimately play a role in the subsequent actions. And so we have certain aspects of the task that will affect the very next one, and that cycle will continue. Now this task can turn into a little bit of a longer duration task and a little bit more of a continuous task because we ultimately determine when the juggling stops. And so that's a little bit of an interesting aspect or component of this task, separate from others. But what we see generally is that when tasks are discrete, part practice tends to be less effective. And when tasks are discrete, whole practice tends to be the method that we're generally going to want to gear our training towards. For whole practice, we oftentimes see that there is a greater ability to use this more effectively for tasks that are serial. This is also known, these are also known as long duration tasks. Something like a gymnastics routine in which a subsequent action does not necessarily affect, a prior action does not necessarily affect the subsequent action. And so this can be effective, when the tasks are very big and there's a lot of components. And eventually they can turn into one routine, but we're able to really split those up, and that can be an effective method to taking a really large complex task with a lot of parts, breaking it up, and then putting it together in an effective manner. So generally speaking, we are going to consider, though, despite the fact that juggling can turn into a continuous task, we're really going to consider it a discrete task. And there's a lot of evidence suggesting at this point, there's studies done by S.Y. Chan, for example, in the year 2015, and some additional authors in that as well, that suggest that adults perform the action of juggling better through whole practice. And so that's going to kind of be the test that we really want to conduct, and that's our hypothesis as well, is that we're also going to assume that whole practice will be more effective for juggling than part practice. Now, the method in which we carried this out was that we took 68 participants, all of which have stated they have little to no juggling experience, and obviously we want to do this to provide our results with more accurate data. And so 34 of these participants were going to perform condition 1, and the next 34 participants were going to perform in a group that performed condition 2. Condition 1 was the part practice method. And to dive into that a little bit, understand that there were 4 different stages ultimately of this method. The first stage of condition 1 included a single ball, and so what we would have the participant do is we would have the ball in one hand, and we would kind of play catch with ourselves. And so what we would do is we would take that ball, say in our right hand, and we would throw it up in the air, and we'd catch it with our left hand, and then we'd take our left hand, throw the ball up in the air, and catch it with our right hand. So that would be considered, every time the ball switches hand, that's considered a transfer. You're going to have 5 transfers per attempt, and there's going to be 8 trials of those. So 8 trials, so you're going to have 40 total transfers in stage 1. In stage 2, this is going to be the 2-ball toss and catch. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have a ball in the left and the right hand, and we're going to throw the ball up in one of the hands, and we're going to throw the ball up in the other hand, or from the other hand, and then catch the 2. Okay, so we're basically going to throw the ball from one hand up into the air, okay, and then we're going to throw the other ball up into the air, and then we're going to catch them with the opposite hands. Task 3 was the 3-ball toss and drop, and so in this stage, what we're going to do is we're going to start the juggling process, but we're not going to be concerned about catching the balls per se. Again, there's going to be a total of 5 attempts, just to ensure that all 3 balls are tossed in the correct order. And again, there's going to be 8 trials for a total of 40 attempts in the 3rd block. Okay, and that is for stage 3. Finally, we go into stage 4, and that is the full juggling process, and this will also be the retention phase. And so in the retention phase, we're going to take 8 total trials, and we're just going to juggle for as long as possible, and we're going to count the number of passes completed to all of our hands, right? And so that's going to give us the number of balls that we were able to juggle for that trial. We're going to average those up, and that is going to be the data collected here that we're going to see here in just a second. For the whole practice, we're essentially going to start juggling right out the gate. There's going to be no coaching. And just to clarify, there's no coaching or feedback given to the participants during the actual experiment. This is all up to them and their own strategies that they want to implement. But we're going to take the whole practice, and we're going to have them juggle right from the get-go. Again, we're going to do 8 trials per block with 5 different blocks, the 5th block being the retention test, and that is the one that counts. So we're going to have a 5-minute rest period after the 4th block, and then we're going to calculate the average once again, and that will be our data shown for the whole practice. So we're going to be comparing apples to apples, in which each of the final stages of both the part practice and the whole practice are attempting the full juggling process with 3 balls and the catches. And so what we see is, coming into the results here, we ultimately found that the whole practice group completed a 6.1 average of passes completed, and the part practice completed 5.07 passes. And so what we're going to do is we're going to essentially, since we can't have a 1/10 of a pass, or a 100th of a pass, what we're going to do is essentially count these as 6 passes for the whole and 5 practices for the part. We also notice that we have a p-value of 0.03, and that will be significant when I go to discuss the meaning of this data. We also have figure 3, which is an individual participant's result, and so we have 1 for condition 1, so we have 1 participant's result there, and 1 participant for the results in condition 2. These both resulted in 2.38 passes, or 2 passes, complete for both the part practice as well as the whole practice. And so that was the data that we collected for this lab. Now, in regards to what this means, again, this does go to support our hypothesis, and that the whole practice is more effective for the juggling process. Again, considering that it was a discrete process, considering that there was other data supporting this methodology, we did expect this to be the case. Again, the p-value also supports the fact that because it is underneath 0.05, that the results are not just happenstance. We're very likely to run into these results again. And so if we were to run another 68 participants that perform this task, we should expect to see similar results. So this is not a fluke. So I'm very comfortable in stating that this experiment does support this hypothesis. Again, in regards to the figure 3, figure 3 again goes to show that there was a bit of an exception here. Again, based off of the p-value, we can kind of consider that this may be a little bit more of a rare occurrence in which the part practice and the whole practice for these two individuals resulted in the same amount of passes complete for both of the two methods that we used. Again, this could be due to the fact that the learning styles of these two participants were a little bit different. That could be part of it as well. And again, one of the things that we have to say as well and consider is that when we say that these participants have minimal to no juggling experience, that's not ideal. Ideally, we want to come in and say, well, we have no juggling experience whatsoever. And so if somebody in here had a little bit of experience, maybe they can make up for that even though they were using an inferior practice method. And so that really concludes my examination for this lab report. I hope you guys enjoyed, and thank you for listening.